Thanks for sticking around for the end of day webinar today. It is December 27th, 2016. We're going to have, what, 1, 2, 3 more trading days in 2016, and then we're going to start a brand new, fresh year in 2017, which I'm very excited to start, and I'm really glad to have some of you new guys on board with us so we can help you reach your trading goals in 2017. So I wanted to go over today one of my favorite long setups, one that we've been using really frequently, one that we've seen a lot of success from people in our groups who are focused mostly on this setup. So I think it's going to be something that, you know, one of the things and the biggest complaints I hear from new traders is that there's so many strategies and so many things to pay attention to. It seems like the biggest problem is people are trying to do too much. So they're trying to long stocks, they're trying to short stocks, they're trying to scalp, they're trying to play lower highs, higher lows, they're all over the place. And what typically tends to happen when you try to trade everything is you end up over trading, ending up with a bunch of broker fees, and never really becoming a master of one strategy. So the first thing that we really think is important is to, whether you've been trading for 2 weeks, a month, or even a year, if you haven't found consistency, it's time to start now at focusing on one strategy that can consistently make you some money. And this is the one that I think is one of the best ones out there that we've been using quite frequently lately. And I'm going to go over it kind of step by step and give you a couple of examples of where I think were good spots to look. So I'm going to start with FIT because this was one of the best setups of the day. And although the stock didn't seem too exciting, I had a nice little run this morning. I'll show you where I would have gotten a long trigger on this one. And I'll show you where the stops and targets and everything should be on this. So let's just go back to our long setup. So this is, again, it's just a guide, all right? So this is not everything, but this is just your checklist to make sure that you're on the right path and that you're looking for the right things in your long setup. So some people had mentioned, like, you know, on CNAT today, like I mentioned, I did like a couple times, if I'm having a pretty slow day and I can't get any real big setups, I'll do some dip buys here and there. I did have like a quick scalp here. Remember, I got long on this dip. Those are the kinds of trades that they work sometimes, other times they don't. It takes some quick fingers and hotkeys and a lot of experience and tape reading to know when they're going to work or not. So I don't think it's a very consistent strategy. I don't think it's one you guys should be focused on. This is the setup that I want you guys to focus on if you're looking for something to try. Of course, at first, try it with very, very small size or with a simulation account to get a feel for how it works. And then once you get some trust and confidence in it, once you start to see it work and start to really gain some confidence in it, then you can slowly start to scale it up. So let's take a look over the criteria for our long setup. So number one is I prefer the stock to be up over 10% on the day. And this is exactly what we got on FIT. We had some nice volume. We got a big push. The stock was up. Just not quite. It wasn't quite up over 10% of the day, but even 5% is good. If the stock has a nice run and it's doing above average volume, that's 1 and 2, then we're good. What I typically look for is a lot of people try to chase the momentum off the open, which if you're okay with that strategy, if it works for you, then good. You can dip by 9 EMA if you want. Typically, the first 2 9 EMA dips are the ones that I trust the most. So if there's a lot of good momentum behind the stock, the first one I like, usually the second one I like. The third one I tend to be a little more skeptical on. But what we want to see is a stock up over 10% in the day, doing above average volume, and 3 is over VWAP. So usually these 3 are all going to kind of be together anyways. Usually if the stock is running up on the day, it's up over 10%, it's going to be doing above average volume and it's going to be over VWAP. So those 3 kind of just tie right in together. But this is one thing that, for example, like if you're looking at a chart in the middle of the day and you're like, I don't know if I should go long this or not, just check and make sure it's over VWAP and then see if the volume is good. There's a couple quick things that you can just check and give you a good idea of whether or not, you know, you're in a spot that's going to give you a high probability setup. The reason I like this setup particularly so much is because the risk is generally really low versus the reward. This is where number 4 comes in, the correction and consolidation. This is where you're going to get an entry with a really low risk setup. And this is why I like this setup so much, is because I've been kind of testing it for a while now and using it for a while. And I've used variations of this for years. I mean, it usually ties into the cup and handle. So you can actually see here, there's a bit of a cup and handle sort of setup right here. But where I'm looking is, so for a big run up in the morning, up over 10% in the day, it's doing good volume. I wait for the pullback to come in. I love to see a dip under VWAP and then to come back over. So we want to see basically, this is the correction. So where it comes back in and retests VWAP. And then if it shows us that it's still holding VWAP, then typically that's obviously a really good sign. It's still showing strength. I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. And then this area right here is the consolidation. And this is usually where I'm going to get my long trigger, is anywhere in this case, anywhere in this sort of 20-minute period right in here. So I'm going to put a few marks, and as we trade during the day, you're going to notice that I'll put marks on the charts as we go. So the first mark I had was at 770. I always mark the top of the range. So when we have a big run up in the morning, the first thing I'm going to do is plot down that 770 level as a breakout level for later if it sets up. And then the second thing I'm going to do is once the consolidation starts, I'm going to plot a second line right there to show where the stop should be. So if we get the correction and then the consolidation over VWAP, we now have a clear stop out point, which is just under 758. And this is where basically you can kind of work on your own sort of little tweak to see where you want to enter, but you can basically enter. I like to wait for at least 10 to 15 minutes of sideways action to really show me that it's holding. So hit that 58, hit it again, and then usually in here somewhere is where I'm going to start to see, especially if you see some volume come in, that's where I'll start to get in. So if I got long, for example, in this case, 60, 61, let's say I just kind of chase the offer up a little bit, I'm basically looking at like a 2-cent risk. This is why this setup is so beautiful, is because for one, you know that the stock is strong on the day. You know that there's eyes on it because it's up on the day. Two is that it did put in a lower high here and it pulled in, but it held VWAP, and VWAP holds a lot of weight on these lower price stocks, especially when it holds. Sometimes it's even better. Sometimes it's even better if it breaks VWAP and then trades under VWAP for 20 minutes, then comes back over and then consolidates, because now we have shorts trapped in it. So that's another really good one to keep in mind. Is I don't typically take it off my chart right away if it breaks VWAP, because sometimes they trade under VWAP for a bit, and then if it breaks over, now we have shorts trapped plus new longs in, which really helps fuel a good move. But in this case, what I'll always do is I'll always plot the breakout level at the top of the morning push, and then we'll be watching for a VWAP test. If it holds, I'll be looking for consolidation. I'll mark a stop out point, which is just under the consolidation area, and then you can basically look for a long anywhere in this area. I tend to look for, again, I like to see 10-15 minutes of sideways action. Even if you get in a little late, 62, it's only 4-cent risk. And in this case, the reward on that 4-cent risk, and this definitely was a trigger for me. JB, I think JB would have had a trigger there too. And so we had 4-cent risk at 764 or 62. So in this case, I'd be targeting at least a third to get out over a high a day push. So you can see that there's the 70 level push through highs. And then typically, guys, what I do is the prior breakout level, the 770 level, the next step is to see if the stock is going to hold that prior resistance as current support for a next push. Now let's push forward here. Notice how it held. It couldn't even get to 70. It was still showing a lot of strength. It tried to get down there, couldn't retest 70. And we just kept consolidating. It kept putting in higher lows. There's really no reason. There's no reason for longs to sell the stock just yet. The one spot I saw that made sense to sell is right here. Boom, right there. On that break, that was a trend break right there. So that was the first spot. So let's just go back and review this. First of all, the stock is up over 10% in the day. It's a huge run up. Second, of course, it's doing above average volume. The stock is in play. It's up over 5. I say 5%. I prefer 10%, but 5% is fine as well. If the stock is a little more expensive, like over $5-6. It's doing above average volume. It's over VWAP. Next step is we're looking for that VWAP retest. If it holds it, and then you see consolidation come in, give it 5-10 minutes to trade sideways. Find your stop out point, which I'll pretty much always mark on the chart with a plot just under there. And then again, this setup, in my experience, it works 7 out of 10 times maybe. If you do it 100 times, it might work 70 times. The beauty of it though is look how much reward you can get on this trade, and look how low the risk is. And this is why. This is the reason why we really tend to focus on this setup as much as possible. Because one, there's a few reasons. One is that because there's a consolidation period, it gives everybody a chance to get involved. So it's not just like getting long and then you look up and the stock's up 10 cents already, and then you're chasing it like what happens in a lot of other trading rooms. Two, it gives newer traders a clear defined risk area. So now you can say like, okay, well, you know what? I'm long 1,000 shares at 60. I'm only comfortable risking $30 on this trade, or maybe you want to use VWAP as your stop. Again, it's your system. This is the way we trade, but you can tweak it to what works for you. If you want to risk off VWAP, then that's cool too, because sometimes you'll get a little wick, and if you're too tight, it might stop you out. But I like to keep it pretty tight. And again, it's okay to have your own little rules for it. So if you find that you'd like to give it a little more room and use VWAP and use less size, then you might find that you get stopped out less and it works better for you. But another thing is, usually after the breakout, it's very common to see a retest of that area. So usually after this breakout of highs, they're going to retest that area to see if it's still holding. And then if it is, I mean, from what I see here, there's no real reason to sell. Obviously, you sell along the way, on the way up, piecing it out. And I actually could have got a trigger in this area as well, but I liked it better down here because there's also another consolidation period that looks pretty good here. But and then you can see higher lows coming in, higher lows, higher lows. And we ran into that 85 resistance, so that was a big spot at 85. And guess what? It's around 1 p.m. This is almost always the time, 12:31, where stocks are going to start. Even 12 is usually where they start to roll over, but this one actually held on pretty good. But that 585 level was a big resistance point, so we plotted that in the chart. And that's going to be our next potential breakout level if the stock holds up over lunch. So let's go back, and then you can see the stock finally started to hold that 775 again. Higher lows, higher lows. I did mention it over the stream here. This consolidation period started to interest me. That's another spot where you could have got a trigger. I really dropped the ball on this one, unfortunately, guys, but at least the setup was there, and at least we identified it in case you wanted to take it. A couple people told me they took that one, but I missed the entry on it again. This one popped up, and then I had a final target I was thinking of around 94 to 96 on this one. So this, guys, I went ahead and recorded this webinar. I want you guys to really, really focus. If you have had any trouble in 2016 with discipline, patience, or becoming a master or really good at one setup, I challenge you to try to focus on this one setup and let me know how the results go. Because I think that, again, if you're doing it properly, your downside risk is very, very little compared to the upside reward. And typically speaking, it's a very high probability setup. So it's one that we've been sort of telling our newer traders, or not telling them, but sort of encouraging our newer traders to focus on. We have noticed definitely an increase in sort of the results from people in the group since they stopped trying to trade all different setups and started to focus on mastering just one. And the other thing is, if we're all looking for the same sort of long setup, then it's just more eyes in the market, and we're all working together to make more money. So it's a beautiful thing any way you spin it. So if you have any questions about that one, please feel free to reach out anytime. All right, guys, thanks very much for being with us again. Nice day today. Tomorrow is going to be a super interesting day. So we start streaming as usual at 8:45 a.m. Do the watch list around 9:10, 9:15. And yeah, I think this week could be good. I like the way things are shaping up. I think we'll see a few good triggers tomorrow, guys. Thanks again. Have a great night. We'll see you in the morning.